Welcome back to Straight Talk. When we left, we were talking about the issue about whether laws are enforced, not enforced, which ones, are in the way. One of the things to me, when we're talking about the jurisdiction of the province in Kahnawake, the amount of provincial jurisdiction in our lives is, to me, I don't want to get it confused in terms of some things I said earlier, in terms of sort of a view about that from sort of a Mohawk perspective, which is that why are we allowing more and more jurisdiction for the province within? But the policing agreement came about because people didn't want the SQ here, and we'll police ourselves. But in order to get sort of an agreement, you have this tripartite agreement between the federal government, and it's between the provincial government, and there you have the setting up of a recognized police force in Kahnawake, the Kahnawake Peacekeepers.
The tri-party agreement in regards to policing had nothing to do with whether the SQ or anybody else here. It was a matter of Quebec finally recognizing that we've had police here for the last 20 years, and that we were policing our own community, but there was no funding available for it. So when they did the 10 agreements, obviously you have to have the enforcement issue and everything else. So how are we going to do that? So the policing agreement became part of that, which ended up putting dollars to pay for that. So it gave, I guess, the fiduciary responsibilities to Canada and Quebec in order for the policing instead of the community.
Yeah, but in exchange you have to render unto Caesar, which is jurisdiction. That's a two-way street, and that's on a political level.
Well, you know what? Yes and no, because it was already being done. The police were already following the Quebec Safety Highway Code. We're already following the Criminal Code of Canada. We're already recognized in all the courts.
Okay,
we're already doing that. Just that.
So the question is why, though?
There was just no agreement because not everybody in our community commits summary conviction acts. You know what I mean? So if somebody's going to commit an indictable offense, then you have no choice but to take it to an outside court to deal with it, because we're not equipped here, and the judges aren't recognized to be able to deal with those situations. So you have no choice. So you have to go out and to do that.
So it's an accommodation.
Yeah, now because of the policing agreement, obviously it expands the the scope of the job, but it's still being done the same way. It's just that the laws, you have now no choice but to follow certain laws if you're going to apply them. That's why in a lot of the instances in the community that the laws in Kahnawake don't apply. The only way that the police would be able to enforce it was to enforce criminal code in regards to all the laws. And if they had done that, then what does that do? How does that jeopardize the agreements that they have with Canada and Quebec? How does that jeopardize the jurisdiction of the community, where we say that no, we're going to apply this law and we're not going to apply yours. We're going to do it in our court. We're not going to do it in yours. So there's a big what if in there. At the end of the day, if something major happens, regardless of whether it's going against Kahnawake law or not, police still have to do their job, and they have to charge them under the appropriate law, which would be the Criminal Code of Canada. And that's the only thing that they're able to do, and or, Highway Safety Code is the Highway Safety Code, which is all summary anyway. Mm-hmm. But anything that's indictable offense, which has a fine over $2,000 and a jail term over 2 years, they have to do outside, and then what's the jurisdictional issues when it comes into play with that. So that's what the tough part is how to balance the political part and how to balance the enforcement part, and how can it work for the community. It doesn't always, and it won't always work because of that, but that's where we are.
All right, so there's something else, and this is not directly to do with policing really in Kahnawake, because this is one of those things.
Well, it's still the enforcement issue.
Yeah.
And the jurisdictional issue between Kahnawake and Quebec. Kahnawake is pushing its limits when it comes to the gaming issue. they're deciding that they're going to do things in this community that are against the law in the province, you know, and then they're using that now as a leverage. And then there's, you know, and in the statement with Mike DeLille, he's saying, well, now the government is not on board. What, they're not on board because they don't want to go into gaming with you? Come on.
Yeah. Well, that's just clarify, in case people are wondering what it is we're talking about, is that there seems to have been a little bit of a shoving match going on between, somebody would use another term for it, but basically drawing and redrawing lines in the sand, and saying, you knock this off of my shoulder and I'll not, you know, whatever, over the issue of gaming. There was the article in the Gazette, was it 2 weeks ago now, with John D. I mean, I don't know, man. The, you know, this looking tough, posturing tough kind of silliness going on is and it's all about the interpretation of a visit of Quebec to Kahnawake, representatives from the Quebec government, and getting a tour of MIT, the facility on the highway, and what the meaning of that was to the parties involved, and Mike DeLille now said, well, no, it was there to talk about gaming specifically, and Quebec is saying, well, no, they said it was, they wanted to show us and whatever, but that wasn't on the table for us to have a discussion about that. And so Kahnawake is at this point where the Mike DeLille, the council of the day, or at least certain members of the council, are hell-bent on this thing about getting Quebec, and by extension Canada, to recognize Kahnawake gaming activities, and recognize it to the point where they say, well, they'll get into business with us. Have they reached the limit on this thing?
You know, if Kahnawake actually thinks that Quebec is going to get in bed with them with this gaming issue and lose revenue or not get their share of revenue, and that's ridiculous.
Well, listen, and the thing is that Quebec will choose when it gets into bed and what position it's going to be in bed, and we have Highway 30 to prove that point. Okay, and where is this land that's been talked about?
You know, I want to ask you a question about that. You know, like the gaming is going to be the gaming, and it's going to be a pissing contest, and I'll say it's a pissing contest between Kahnawake and Quebec, and it's going to continue that way, is because Kahnawake is saying that we're going to do it our way. Quebec says no, you can, you know, eventually something's going to happen, and Quebec is going to turn around and probably say to the RCMP and the SQ, I want you to do a thorough investigation and deal with this once and for all, and then see who behind the scenes who's getting rich off this, and because it's not this community. You know what I mean?
No,
because it all comes down to money.
I mean, but those are questions we would ask internally, and we do ask internally.
We'll never find that out, because unless somebody does an investigation, we'll never find that out. But more so, I want to ask you a question. But we're going to take a break. But I want to ask you a question about that Highway 30 situation, because I know you brought it up before, and I didn't understand exactly what you were talking about.
Okay.
So with that, we'll take a short break and we'll be back with more Straight Talk.
All right. What is it?